an appeals court earlier back in August had in fact cleared the way for the restructuring at CFPB. It was a 2-1 decision in which Trump appointees had ruled that the sweeping drive to close the agency could not be reviewed by the courts. It was prohibited, but it did clear the way for the Trump administration to largely dismantle the work. It had lifted a lower court's injunction that had preserved the agency's structure. It, of course, barred mass layoffs for months as well. But, of course, now the Trump administration is ordering the Consumer Protection Agency to stop work, closing the building as well. Remember, this entire agency, the CFPB, was effectively created to protect consumers after the 2008 financial crisis and subprime mortgage lending scandal. In fact, Russell Watt, the newly installed director, of the Office of Management and Budget, directed the CFPB to stop work on proposed rules, to suspend the effective dates on any rules that were finalized but not yet effective, and to stop investigative work and not begin any new investigations. The agency, as I mentioned earlier, has been a target of several political attacks ever since the Obama administration had pushed to include it in the 2010 financial reform legislation that followed the 2007-8 financial crisis. In fact, officials have also stated that the CFPB's headquarters in Washington, D.C. are likely to be closed down as well. With us on the broadcast is Ms. Alison Mutler, former Associated Press Bureau Chief, joining us from Romania. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. We're, of course, tracking what the Trump administration is planning to do with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It is planning to remove all remaining cases and transfer it to the Justice Department. The Democrats are arguing that such a move could lead to the dismantling of the organization itself, which would then leave consumers more vulnerable to cases such as fraud and scams and being taken advantage of in financial means as well. I wanted to understand from you, apart from this, what other implications are there? There is a court ruling that does prohibit this from taking place.
Well, I mean, generally, it's a story about the Trump administration trying to stop any independent organizations, think tanks, NGOs, et cetera, and bring everything under his administration, the Justice Department. He doesn't want any organization which is independent of the administration causing him problems. He's seeking to exert control over it. So that's the basic story, what it's about.
Indeed. And could we then expect some sort of a legal battle to play out as well? Because up until now, we've seen courts rule that his administration must not dismantle the organization. The courts did, in fact, provide a pathway towards the restructuring of the CFPB, but not outrightly dismantling it.
Yes, I think we can expect legal battles, as we've seen with other cases that Trump has pushed for. It's a battle between the justice system and the courts, rule of law, and Trump. So I think we can expect this to be protracted. He's been very clear that he will use all legal means possible, and he's trying to get this organization under his control. That is part of his policy, and yes, we can expect ongoing court battles. What the final outcome will be is unclear for the moment, but there is an attempt to weakening democracy in the United States.
All right, ma'am, requesting you to stay on with us as we're shifting our focus away from the United States of America towards Belgium. We're now learning that Belgium is set for 3 days of strikes, with unions protesting government austerity measures, including spending cuts and labor law reforms. The strike will unfold in 3 waves, starting with transportation disruptions, a public sector strike, and a full general strike on the Wednesday. SNCB trains will operate at reduced capacity, and several Eurostar services have been cancelled as well. Schools, hospitals, and other public services will join the strike on Tuesday, that is tomorrow, with no flights expected at Brussels, Zaventem, and Charleroi airports on Wednesday as well. The protests target Prime Minister, but the waivers proposed budget cuts aimed at reducing Belgium's high national debt. Unions argue that the measures threaten social programs, while the waivers government seeks agreement on reforms by Christmas. Still with us on the broadcast is Ms. Alison Mutler. I wanted to understand from you, on one hand, Belgium's government is facing mounting debt and pressure due to that. On the other, the unions are arguing for the fact that the spending should not be cut down and reform should not take place as far as labour laws are concerned. Do you think the De Wever government will try to strike a balance between the two, or will it go ahead with its current plan?
I imagine today there'll be lots of negotiations between the union and the government. The government will be seeking to alleviate the pain of all this closure, which is going to cost the country a lot socially, economically, politically, etc., etc. So I think there'll be a lot of negotiations going on behind the scenes, and whether a compromise can be made between union leaders and the government is unsure. But obviously this is going to hit Belgium, and not just Belgium. Is it's a very important capital. You have the European Union there, other international organizations. So it's not just the Belgian people who are being affected, but also internationally it'll be very badly affected. So I would imagine there'll be negotiations going on, because the strikes are very serious. I mean, if it's transportation and hospitals and schools, it was like a shutdown for the country. So I think the government will be trying to negotiate with the union so that they can come to some settlement. It's unclear how tough the unions are in Belgium, whether they will press with maximalist demands or whether they'll be able to reach a compromise. Generally, unions in the end do reach a compromise, but they have a couple of key demands. So I think that's what will be happening, because it'll be costing the country millions, probably billions of euros.
Absolutely. You've spoken about the international implications as well, even as the government is trying to balance its debt reduction along with its social programs. But if, hypothetically speaking, an agreement is not reached by Christmas, how might this affect investor confidence in Belgium?
Well, of course it is. I mean, already in Belgium, we have a 5-party coalition.
Yes.
And coalition governments are very difficult because it requires agreement on all parties, and they're from different political wings. So that is already much more difficult to start with. But I think it will be negotiations, what the government could roll back on, what the unions are insisting on. But there's obviously designed to be increased pressure. And this is 3 days of strike, and then there's demands for Christmas. So I can think we'll expect a crisis, an ongoing crisis, which will definitely affect investor confidence. So, and that is bad for the government, which needs as much money as it can get at the moment.
Absolutely, Ms. Mutler. With that, I'd like to thank you for taking our time, of course, putting what's taking place in the United States and in Belgium into perspective. On that note, viewers, we're shifting focus to Slovenia. We're now learning that Slovenians have voted against a law that would have legalized assisted dying for terminally ill adults. According to unofficial results released by the State Election Commission, the partial count shows 53.43% opposed and 46.57% in favour. The law, passed by Parliament in July, was sent to a binding referendum after a citizens' initiative led by right-wing politician Alice Primk. Primk celebrated the results, stating it demonstrates that the culture of life has defeated the cult of death. Supporters of the bill had argued that it would provide relief to adults facing unbearable suffering with no chance of recovery. Take a look.
Zato, ker sem jaz bolana, 4. stadij raka in ne bi rada trpela. Dala sem pa že skozi očeta pa mamo, oče raka, mama demenco, tako da vem, kako je to.
Pravico do končanja življenja ja, ampak tukaj ne glasujemo samo za pravico, ampak glasujemo za tale zakon, ki bi pa po mnenju mnogih moral biti dosti boljši.
Shifting focus away from Slovenia towards Lithuania, we're now learning that Lithuania's Vilnius airport temporarily halted its operations yesterday as it reportedly found weather balloons moving towards its airspace. This caused the airport to divert some of its incoming flights to other cities. This comes as repeated drone sightings and incursions have troubled European aviation in the recent months. Such incidents have been reported at airports in Copenhagen and Brussels, with the Vilnius airport closure becoming the 9th shutdown in Lithuania's capital since early October. According to Lithuanian authorities, the recent airspace disruptions were due to weather balloons, which they claim were from the neighboring country of Belarus and intended to transport illegally traded or untaxed cigarettes. The authorities have also blamed the Belarus president for allowing such a practice and even called it a form of hybrid warfare. Meanwhile, responding to Lithuania's border closure measures of last month, Belarusian President Lukashenko has called them a crazy scam and even broadly accused the West of waging a hybrid war against Belarus and Russia. Well, viewers, due to paucity of time, this is all we have for this particular bulletin. More news and updates on the other side. Stay tuned on NewsX World.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. According to Vietnam's Environment Ministry, floods in Vietnam have claimed 90 lives with 12 people still missing. Torrential rain and landslides have battered South Central provinces since late October. Flooding in northern Malaysia has displaced over 5,000 people, including 5,142 evacuees in Kelantan, where days of heavy rain have forced residents into 26 relief centers. Local authorities also reported 528 evacuees in Terengganu, as meteorological officials warn of continuous heavy rains and strong winds across the region. Myanmar's junta says it has arrested 1,594 nationals in just 5 days during major raids on the Shui Koko scam hub, seizing 2,893 computers, 21,750 phones, and over 100 Starlink receivers. The crackdown comes as internet scam networks continue to thrive in Myanmar's borderlands amid civil war. The United States, Ukraine, and key European partners are gathering in Geneva today for critical talks on U.S. President Donald Trump's plan to end the war in Ukraine. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has arrived in Geneva and is joined by U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney once again reiterated, saying Ottawa will resume trade talks with President Donald Trump when appropriate, after Trump suspended negotiations last month over an anti-tariff ad from Ontario's government. Carney, speaking at the G20 in Johannesburg, said he remains open to discussions with the United States. U.S. Federal Appeals Court has rejected the Trump administration's bid to expand fast-track deportations nationwide, with judges ruling the policy posed serious risks of erroneous summary of removal for immigrants. The decision upholds District Judge Gia Cobb's ruling that the policy violated due process rights for some immigrants. At least 10 people have died and around 20 were injured on Saturday when a tourist bus overturned in Michoacan, Mexico. The bus had left Uruapan for Tralpujahua authorities have not yet determined the cause, and investigations are still ongoing. Cyclone Fina has slammed Australia's Northern Territory with 205 km/h winds, knocking out power for about 19,000 people in Darwin. Local Chief Minister Leah Finocchiaro has said that the Category 3 storm caused property damage and flooded roads, but left no reported injuries as crews began assessing widespread destruction. Now we start with the Middle East. Israel has carried out an airstrike in Beirut's southern suburbs, targeting what it says was a Hezbollah militant. The Israeli military reports the strikes hit a major road in the capital, and residents say they heard the road of war planes moments before the explosions. Panic swept through the neighborhood as people rushed out of apartment buildings, fearing more attacks. Medical sources say at least 24 people were wounded and taken to nearby hospitals. There has been no immediate response from Hezbollah or Lebanon's health ministry. Meanwhile, senior U.S. official says Israel did not notify us in advance about Beirut's strike. According to them, they were informed immediately after the strike. Following the strike, Lebanese President Joseph Aoun urged the international community to take strong action to halt Israel's attacks on Lebanon. Aoun has emphasized the need for a firm and serious response to protect the country and its people from further violence. The strike comes as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will continue fighting what he calls terrorism on several fronts. Israel has intensified airstrikes in southern Lebanon in recent weeks, accusing Hezbollah of trying to rebuild military positions near the border. Hezbollah denies the claim and says it has adhered to last year's U.S.-brokered ceasefire terms. Let's listen into what IDF spokesperson Shush Bedrosian has said.
And a short while ago, the IDF attacked the Hezbollah chief of staff in the heart of Beirut, who led the strengthening and arming of the terrorist organization. Prime Minister Netanyahu ordered the attack upon the recommendation of the defense minister and the IDF chief of staff. Israel is determined to act and achieve its goals anywhere and at all times. As Israel continues to strike Hezbollah targets in Lebanon, Prime Minister Netanyahu said this morning at the government meeting that Israel will continue to do everything necessary to prevent Hezbollah from re-establishing its capacity to threaten us. Israel continues to insist on the full enforcement of the ceasefire agreement with Lebanon, while taking steps to ensure our security. We will not allow Hezbollah, the terror organization, to recover and rebuild its strength and threaten Israel from anywhere inside of Lebanon. The terror organization's activities continue to constitute a violation of the understandings between Israel and Lebanon.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Sol Sadka. He's a political commentator, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Sol, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, Sol, thank you. Now, Sol, looking at this, what are the political implications of Israel asserting full independence from U.S. approval in its security decision with the situation given and their geography?
I don't know if that's a correct interpretation of what's happened. What Israel has been doing in Lebanon continually since the ceasefire, which is now more than a year in the making in Lebanon, is entirely consistent with the terms of that ceasefire, whereby if the Lebanese are not successfully implementing the ceasefire and disarming Hezbollah, Israel reserves the right to continue treating them, which is what happened today. And yet another one of the long line of Hezbollah chiefs of staff that have been replaced over the past 2 years due to their sudden demise has been eliminated. So it seems. We'll find out.
And
I don't think that is in any way a change of policy from the Israelis at all.
Right, but as U.S. mentioned that they were unaware of these strikes. What do you make of that?
The U.S. might have indeed been unaware of these strikes. The man assassinated is a U.S. designated terror mastermind on a long list of terror watch lists And it's not clear that Israel has been coordinating any of the strikes that it's been doing on a continual basis against Hezbollah rearmament in Lebanon over the past year at all. The main thing for Israel right now in Lebanon is to continue attriting Hezbollah faster than Hezbollah are able to rearm. And as long as it keeps doing that, Hezbollah will only remain a threat to the Lebanese people. In the end, the Lebanese state can only function if the Hezbollah army no longer exists, exerting control and holding more power than the Lebanese army itself. If the Lebanese army itself continues to be beholden to the Hezbollah army, then Lebanon is not really an independent state and will continue to be a basket case as it has been since the 1970s. And the Israelis, I think I speak for all Israelis, Israel has no beef with the Lebanese people. The relationship between Israel and Lebanon can be fabulous. We have shared natural resources in the Mediterranean Sea that are a trifle, essentially, for Israel, which has much more natural gas and vastly greater GDP. But for Lebanon would be absolutely game-changing if they could extract that natural resource. The future for Lebanon in peace with Israel is fantastic, but the future for Lebanon under the thumb of Hezbollah continues. Lebanon is currently, after Afghanistan, it is assessed as the second most miserable place in the world to live. Despite its beautiful scenery, its long Mediterranean coast, and tremendous potential in human capital, it's the second most miserable place in the world to live. And that is entirely because of Hezbollah, an Iranian militia that has occupied their lands for 40 years at this point and has totally failed in their mission to destroy Israel. So they turn Lebanon into a basket case. So it would be a weapon against Israel, yet it fails even in that. So we can only pray that Israel attacking the Hezbollah leadership, as is continuing now, is the starting point, perhaps, for the Lebanese themselves to be able to rise up and overcome the final remnants of Hezbollah. Israel itself has not got the will to complete the de-Hezbollahization of Lebanon. The Lebanese people are going to have to do that. It's only in Israel's interest to reduce Hezbollah to the extent that they can no longer attack Israel in a significant way. And it can continue to do that by the continual process of moderate attrition as it has been doing up till now.
And so, as you mentioned that, Israeli people do not have beef with Lebanese people, but these many strikes by Israel targeting Hezbollah also involved some accidental killings or killings of civilians, right? So don't you think those families will not maybe like Israel as their families were killed in these strikes?
I completely agree. Obviously, if when you attack terrorists that have set themselves up inside civilian areas, there's always going to be the chance, despite your best efforts, that uninvolved civilians will lose their lives or be injured. And no doubt their families will not look at Israel kindly. Yet when you look at it within the wider picture, the damage that Hezbollah has done to Lebanon, reducing its GDP to essentially zero, to virtually zero, destroying its currency, about a third of all the people of Lebanon have left. The population of Lebanon is now believed to be about 4 million. Lebanon is being destroyed by Hezbollah. The only way that will stop happening, so big picture, the only way that can stop happening is if Israel helps the Lebanese people to get rid of Hezbollah. I am in touch with many people in Lebanon.
Right,
every one of them, including Shia, who are naturally affiliated to Hezbollah, which is a Shia militia.
So,
want
unfortunately,
Hezbollah gone, and they are
yes.
grateful for Israel for helping them.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time for this discussion, but thank you very much, Sol Sadka, for joining us today and sharing that insight. Now we move on to Africa. At the G20 summit in Johannesburg, South Africa, leaders have reaffirmed their commitment to multilateralism even as U.S. President Donald Trump's unilateral policies continue to generate tensions. Brazilian President Lula da Silva has emphasized that despite Trump's efforts to dismantle multilateral frameworks, global cooperation will ultimately prevail. Let's listen in.
O presidente Trump tem dado demonstrações já há alguns meses. Ele já se afastou da Unesco, ele já se afastou da Organização Mundial do Comércio, sabe? Ele está tentando fazer uma pregação prática, sabe, do fim do multilateralismo, tentando fortalecer o unilateralismo. E eu acho que vai vencer o multilateralismo.
Outcome of the summit was the G20 leaders' declaration, which addressed global challenges such as the climate crisis without the involvement of the United States. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, who hosted the summit, highlighted that the declaration reflects a renewed commitment to multilateral action. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India has called for a global compact on artificial intelligence, emphasizing the need for ethical standards to prevent misuse. While the summit focused on strengthening multilateral cooperation, the U.S. boycott and tensions surrounding the war in Ukraine has emphasized the challenges facing international cooperation. European leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron, warned that geopolitical divisions could signal the end of the G20's effectiveness in addressing global crisis. Now, for this discussion, we welcome Professor Andrew Latham. He's an international relations expert, joined us live from Minneapolis. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Professor, now, looking at this, how effective do you think these whatever comes out of G20 could be, and how does unilateral actions by U.S. is affecting the credibility of this institution?
Well, this institution, like a lot of institutions that we are still in existence, was created either during the Cold War or during the post-Cold War era, in which we were in a very different geopolitical situation. Bipolarity during the Cold War, obviously, the US, USSR, and unipolarity in the aftermath of that conflict, in which the US got to be the principal rule maker. Everybody wanted to join the American-led clubs, and a cooperation around the planet was premised on American leadership. That world has passed, and now we're in an era of multipolarity, and whether it's Turkey or India or South Africa or Brazil, regional great powers around the world are reasserting their right to help make the rules, not just be rule takers, but be rule makers. And it remains to be seen if the G20 could survive that moment of transition. It was built for a different world. It may adapt. It may continue to have some utility. It may morph into something quite different, or it may die, but remains to be seen.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Professor Andrew Latham for joining us today and sharing that insight from U.S. Now we move on to our next news. U.S. President Donald Trump has recently claimed that Ukrainian leadership has shown little gratitude for U.S. efforts to end the ongoing war in Ukraine. Meanwhile, addressing media on the sidelines of the G20 summit, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has said that he is not convinced that Ukraine will be able to come to an agreeable solution within the timeline stipulated by the peace plan, but forwarded by President Donald Trump. Let's listen into what more he has shared.
Es geht jetzt darum, dass wir auf der Basis des 28-Punkte-Plans, der von der amerikanischen Regierung vorgelegt worden ist, ein zustimmungsfähiges Dokument machen, das von der Ukraine sozusagen eingebracht wird, akzeptiert wird in eine Verhandlung mit Russland. Ich habe noch einmal einen weiteren Vorschlag gemacht, der sozusagen unterhalb der kompletten Lösung bleibt. Ich will das hier im Detail nicht weiter ausführen, weil dies zurzeit gerade in Genf verhandelt wird. Ich bin unverändert, ja, ich will nicht sagen pessimistisch, aber ich bin im Augenblick noch nicht davon überzeugt, dass es im Laufe der nächsten Tage zu der von Präsident Trump gewünschten Lösung kommt. So, wir haben heute Sonntag. Der Plan von Präsident Trump ist am Donnerstag einen Abschluss herbeizuführen. Davon sind wir nach wie vor sehr weit entfernt. Was nicht heißt, dass es völlig ausgeschlossen ist, ihn zu erreichen. Aber ich bin skeptisch, ob angesichts der gegenwärtigen Differenzen ein solches Ergebnis möglich ist. Aber das müssen wir abwarten.
Moreover, commenting on the peace plan, Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has said that the proposal should be revised to ensure Ukrainians and Europeans feel represented. Let's listen in.
Respetando y reconociendo el esfuerzo que hace la administración estadounidense, creo que ese plan, esa propuesta de paz, tiene que ser revisada en profundidad, sobre todo para que los europeos y los ucranianos nos podamos sentir representados y podamos construir esa paz justa y duradera que lógicamente merecen y necesitan los ucranianos y desde luego necesita también Europa.
This comes as Ukrainian, US, and European officials gathered in Geneva to discuss the draft plan presented by Washington. The plan has raised concerns over potential major concessions to Russia, including territorial yieldings, limits on Ukraine's military, and reunification of NATO ambitions. Now for this discussion, we welcome Glenn Grant. He's a former advisor to Defense Minister of Ukraine. Thank you very much, Glenn, for joining us again. Good to see you. Glenn, now looking at, thank you. Hi. Now looking at this, while we know that U.S. delegation in Ukraine discusses peace talks, the war goes on. How is this escalating situation in the battle going to affect the peace talks? And what are you expecting from these talks?
Yeah, okay. Well, first of all, I just tell you that I'm in Kiev at the moment. And we're in blackout, and the light you can see is from my orienteering headlamp, which I brought with me. And this is typical of things at the moment. I was talking to people yesterday and the day before here, and most of them just think that the plan is a joke, and that Zelensky cannot afford to take it seriously. I mean, I was actually talking to soldiers two days ago who were back from the front line. And they just think it will have to be ignored because it's so completely a Russian plan and just a maximalist Putin plan that it's actually beyond common sense. Let's just say that the fighting will just go on and just carry on because Russia's not going to stop, and therefore Ukraine can't stop.
And so you are critical of whatever comes out of this, and what do you think? U.S. President Trump recently claimed that Ukrainian leadership had shown little gratitude for U.S. efforts to end the ongoing war. What do you think could be Trump's motivation? Is it Nobel Peace Prize again, or do you think it could be connected to him losing voters during the government shutdown?
Neither of those things. He's been working for Trump solidly now for 10 years. The evidence is hugely overwhelming that he is in Trump's pocket. And this plan was written in Russia because you can tell, because the language is not English. It's been translated from Russian and it's very bad English in many cases. And as I said, it's just the maximalist Putin plan that Trump has looked at, added a few thoughts of his own, like, we want 50% of the profit of anything that happens in Ukraine, and sent it on its way. I'm not sure Trump even understands what he's done. I really don't at the moment. And to talk about his motivations are just unfathomable at times, and this is another one of those times.
Right. And Glenn, what political challenges are rising between U.S. and Kyiv now? As you mentioned, I did not know that, but you mentioned that you noticed these writings of the proposal was really poor English, and it looked or seemed like it was translated from even Russian to English. And do you think Ukraine and U.S. Can attempt to find a common ground?
No, I don't. And sorry, it doesn't seem like it was translated. It was translated from Russian because many of the translations are actually using the Russian spelling of things, like the names Kharkiv, Kherson, and things like this. So it was clearly written in Russia. If Trump continues the way he's going with his views, there can be no common ground because he just wants to punish Ukraine.
Glenn, there might be a network issue with Glenn, but thank you very much, Glenn, for joining us today. That was Glenn Grant from Kyiv. He gave us an insight and the reality of what living in Kyiv looks like. Thank you very much, Glenn. Now we move on to our next news. 50 of the 303 school children abducted from a Catholic school in Niger State, Nigeria, have escaped captivity and reunited with their families, bringing relief to some distraught parents. The children aged between 10 to 18 have escaped individually between Friday and Saturday. However, 253 children and 12 teachers still remain in the hands of kidnappers who attacked St. Mary's School on Friday. No group has claimed responsibility, but authorities have deployed tactical squads and local hunters to aid in the rescue. The abduction is part of a troubling trend in northern Nigeria, where armed gangs have used school kidnappings to demand ransoms, creating widespread insecurity. Niger State schools have since been closed in response to this attack. Now we move on to Europe. Real Madrid president Florentino Perez has said that the club will hold an extraordinary general meeting to vote on major reforms to its stages. Speaking at the annual General Assembly, Perez has avoided directly addressing reports that Real Madrid may allow private investors to take up to 10% stake in the club. He told members the proposed reforms are aimed at preparing Real Madrid to face the challenges of the next 50 years. Media reports say the club is reconsidering opening its member-owned structure to outside investors following similar moves across European football. Perez has long argued that Real's traditional model limits competitiveness in a rapidly changing market. Let's listen into what the Real Madrid president has shared.
La conclusión es clara, seguiremos siendo un club de socios, pero debemos crear una filial en la que los 100.000 socios del Real Madrid conservemos siempre el control absoluto. Sobre esta base, esta filial podría incorporar simplemente, por valorar el club, una participación minoritaria, no sé, del 5%, una cosa así, para que sepamos lo que vale.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral.
Simply overlook and move on. And I ask you, do not stay silent. Do not be passive observers of history. Be participants. It is important to support Ukraine now, and I thank you for that support. It is important to support the negotiation process, and I'm grateful for every piece of advice and every bit of information we receive from European leaders. And it is crucial to support the principles on which Europe stands, that borders cannot be changed by force, that war criminals must not escape justice, and that the aggressor must pay fully for the war he started. And this is why decisions on Russian assets are essential. Please support these decisions, and above all, keep pressure on Russia. Russia is still killing people every day. Occupied territories remain occupied. And that means Russia remains a criminal state. Today, almost 70 parliamentary delegations are present. And if parliaments in Europe, in the world, do not close their eyes to this, then no one will. Thank you for your support. Slava Ukraini!
Glory to Ukraine.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
we would have dealt with U.S. a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that human
Hello and welcome viewers. You're watching a NewsX World Special Bulletin called the Africa Brief. And here are the headlines. French President Emmanuel Macron, Germany's Friedrich Merz and Kenya's William Ruto are among dozens of European Union and African leaders expected in Luanda amid a US-European rift over Washington's plan to end the Ukraine conflict. Talks with African nations will center on trade, migration and critical raw materials. Coup-prone Guinea-Bissau headed to polls in presidential and legislative elections with President Umaro Sissoco embroiled in a tight contest to become the first leader in 3 decades to win a second consecutive term in the West African nation. He's up against 11 other candidates, the strongest of them relative political newcomer Fernando Dias, who has the backing of the party that led the fight for independence from Portugal in the 1960s and 70s. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has hailed the tremendous progress made in talks with Ukrainian counterpart in Geneva, and the US and Ukraine put forward an updated proposal for peace between Ukraine and Russia. Sudan's Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan has called the latest truce proposal sent by US envoy Massad Boulos on behalf of a group of mediators the worst yet and unacceptable to his government. This comes after US President Trump announced that he will be looking into the situation in the civil war-torn country at Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's request. French President Emmanuel Macron met with his counterpart Brice Oligui Nguema from Gabon in Libreville. The two leaders reaffirmed their commitment to a reinvented partnership following bilateral talks. At least 6 people have been killed in what is being described as a suicide bombing in Pakistan's Peshawar. The target of the attack was a Pakistani paramilitary force headquartered in the city. Israeli army released a video claiming to show the strike that killed Hezbollah's top military commander in the southern suburb of Beirut despite a US brokered truce a year ago. The strike, the first on the outskirts of the Lebanese capital in months, targeted Iran-backed Hezbollah's acting chief of staff, Ali Tatabai, the ministry has revealed in a statement. More than 11,000 people in 7 Malaysian states have been affected by flooding caused by torrential rain. A report from the National Disaster Management Agency has shown that 3,839 families have been affected by flooding as of 6 a.m. local time. Well, viewers, those were the headlines, and here is our top focus. The Christian Association of Nigeria has confirmed at least 50 children, part of the 300 abducted from St. Mary's Catholic School in the Niger state, have escaped their captors. The mass kidnapping is one of the largest in Nigeria's recent history, following a string of abductions across the country. The raids on St. Mary's was preceded by kidnappings in Kebbi and Kwara states, where gunmen took 25 girls and 38 worshippers respectively. President Bola Tinubu has announced that 51 children from the school have now been rescued, although many, including 25 girls from Kebbi, remain missing. The recent wave of abductions has raised alarms about growing insecurity in Nigeria, with armed gangs targeting schools for ransom. Pope Leo XIV and US President Donald Trump have condemned the kidnappings, while Aisha Yusufu of the Bring Back Our Girls movement has criticized the government's failure to curb this particular crisis. With us on the broadcast is Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev, former Indian ambassador to Nigeria. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. Yet another case of school children being kidnapped, being held for ransom, but fortunately they've managed to escape in this particular scenario. What does this really reveal about the security apparatus of Nigeria? Trump recently has been slinging pot shots. It's being denied by the Tinubu government that does maintain that it has a situation under control. But do instances like this really reveal what's happening on the ground?
Lot about what is not right with security situation in Nigeria, particularly in far-flung areas outside the main metropolis. I think at the same time it needs to be said that the violence is more directed at as a criminal activity for ransom than for religion's sake. I should add here that it's not unusual for Nigeria to see a spike in kidnappings just before Christmas, as the kidnappers then want to get hefty ransoms, which enables them to buy gifts for themselves and for their near and dear. So it's a love of the lucre, and I think the authorities should have been well aware of this practice. Be as it may, the incident is, I need to correct what you have described. Over 300 girls and teachers were taken away from the Niger State Christian missionary school hostels, out of which President has acknowledged that 51 children have escaped. He calls it having been rescued. One perhaps is being elastic with the truth somewhere. So rest of them are still in captivity, and rescuers have to try and persuade the kidnappers to agree on a ransom quantity or attempt a military rescue attempt, which could be frightfully expensive in terms of human lives. The area is semi-arid, the Niger state where the kidnappings has taken place, and there are vast spreads of semi-desert situations and forests. So one would have to be careful about those situations. The president has tried to deflect the criticism of the security agencies, police. Police in Nigeria is a federal agency all over the state. There are no state policemen. It's all controlled from Abuja. So president has to, and his cabinet stand to be blamed. He has announced recruitment of 30,000 more policemen, and he has ordered that all VIP security policemen would be absolved of their duties, and VIPs would get no policemen for their protection, while these policemen would join the hunt for kidnappers. So he's aware of the popular discontent coming out of these instances and the security loopholes that it has exposed. Internationally, I think these kidnappings come at a bad time for the president, with President Trump trying to, as you mentioned, find faults with Nigerian security system, which allows Christians to be killed and persecuted. So here he has initially tried to deflect that criticism by saying that Nigeria would talk to Americans and others to strengthen its security architecture. But this seemed to have gone awry with the latest kidnappings. Perhaps they were on purpose, done on the Christians so as to give further poignancy to what President Trump has been saying. But I doubt if President Trump has any intention of putting boots on ground. That would be a disastrous situation, because the fight in Nigeria's largest or most populous country, I should say, may involve being sizable numbers, and may also involve being there for a very long time. Thank you.
Indeed, sir. Requesting you to stay on with us as we're tracking further updates. We're now learning that Sudan's army chief, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, has rejected the latest truce proposal submitted by U.S. envoy Masad Boulos on behalf of international mediators. In a video statement released by his office, he has stated that the plan was unacceptable for his government and has criticized the involvement of the Quad, which, as we know, includes the United States, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates in the Middle East. He's further claimed that the Quad in the Middle East could not be impartial as long as the UAE remains a member, where he referred to international accusations that Abu Dhabi has supplied support to the Rapid Support Forces. But the UAE has previously denied those claims, despite reports being penned by the United Nations in 2024. Additionally, al-Burhan has noted that the proposal would reduce the role of the armed forces and security agencies while allowing the RSF to retain their current positions. The RSF, however, has reportedly agreed to the truce offer earlier. The army chief's remarks come days after US President Donald Trump stated that he would work to end the war, following a request from the Saudi Crown Prince. Burhan has expressed appreciation for this initiative and stated that he welcomes efforts aimed at a genuine settlement. The Sudanese army chief has been repeatedly urging mediators to adopt an agreement which will ensure that the RSF fully withdraws from areas they are currently controlling and move to designated locations. As of the situation on the ground, the Sudanese army faces immense pressure and has lost its last major stronghold in Darfur last month. The army now controls the country's north, east and central regions, including Khartoum, while the RSF holds most of the west and parts of southern Kordofan. Still with us on the broadcast is Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev. Interesting development, of course, Sudan contending this particular proposal that has been made to it by the United States of America due to the involvement of the UAE. For the benefit of our viewers, could you really explain what exactly are the Sudanese army chief's gripes with the United Arab Emirates and the fact that it tacitly does fund the RSF?
You've raised a tall order for me to meet, but I'll try my best. Uh, Sudan is undergoing a civil war for nearly 2.5 years now. It has become the largest humanitarian crisis in the world as of now, with more than 11 million people displaced, nearly a quarter of, or a fifth of Sudan's population. Mm, In addition, about 4 million people have been forced to migrate abroad to the neighboring countries such as Chad, Egypt, Ethiopia, South Sudan, Central African Republic, etc. There's been a vast scale of devastation, and the two contending sides are Sudan Armed Forces and Rapid Support Forces. These were partners in overthrowing the last president, uh, al-Bashir, but then fell off with each other when a provisional constitution uh, wanted RSF to be merged with the SAF. The two sides began fighting with each other, and they have been since February 2023, and they have been at each other's throat. The battle lines have shifted considerably, but they seem to have currently coagulated around the way you described it. SAF controlling east, north, and center of Nigeria, of Sudan, while the RSF being predominant in Darfur region to the west, and with its partners in Kordofan region in the south. Now, there's no word about how many people might have been injured or killed, but the number touted vary from 60,000 people killed to thrice that number. It's been major debilitating event for the current century, overshadowing what's happening in Gaza and Ukraine, but receiving far less coverage. Now, international support has been surreptitiously given to both sides. As reports indicate, RSF is being supported by United Arab Emirates, the warring sides in Libya, one of the warring side, and South Sudan, as well as Wagner Group of Russia, as it existed earlier. The SAF is being supported by Egypt, Saudi Arabia to some extent, and Turkey. Iran has also reportedly supported SAF. Now, with that in picture, various multilateral and bilateral attempts have been made to secure peace and have a ceasefire to control this horrific bloodletting. These have not succeeded. The current sort of efforts are being undertaken by a quad of 4 countries: Saudi Arabia, US, Egypt, and UAE. I should say that Saudi Crown Prince, during his visit to Washington White House, has publicly urged President Trump to redouble his efforts to find suitable solutions to the Sudan crisis so that a ceasefire can be effected. And President Trump has admitted that he was not paying as much attention as he should have to this crisis, being busy with Ukraine and Gaza. But he has acceded to MBS request, Saudi Crown Prince request, and promised that he would do something to make sure that the ceasefire is effected. Now, this statement by the two leaders has been enthusiastically supported yesterday by SAF Commander Mr. Burhan, who's also acting as president of the country. From SAF side, RSF has kept quiet about it. On the same day, as SAF leader Burhan has issued another televised statement saying that quad peace proposal made earlier in the month is not acceptable because it has UAE as a party. Now, the reply to your question about UAE's machinations for supporting RSF are plenty. On political side, it believes that Sudan, SAF, is beholden to the Islamists, and UAE does not like political Islam. It also wants a friendly government in Khartoum, as it has investments there. It is eyeing the coast of Red Sea coast of Sudan, which is strategically important, and it also is thinking in terms of the agricultural land being appropriated for growing crops to UAE. On the economic side, there's also gold and oil that RSF has, and UAE would be interested. It is estimated that over $1 billion worth of black amount of gold is transshipped by RSF to UAE, and it's melted down in Dubai and introduced as illegitimate gold. So UAE does have some profit to be made from that gold trade. Thank you.
Indeed, sir. With that, I'd like to thank you for taking our time, of course, explaining very comprehensively to our viewers what exactly is going on as far as this particular conflict is concerned. On that note, we're shifting focus to more news coming in, this time from South Africa. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has stated that the G20 summit's declaration reflects a renewed commitment to global cooperation, despite tensions with the United States. At the summit's closing ceremony, Ramaphosa emphasized that leaders shared goals such as addressing climate change, debt relief for developing nations, and green energy transitions outweighed differences amongst member states. Now, the summit, which was the first G20 held in South Africa, it concluded with a declaration focusing on issues important to the global south, including climate recovery and financial support for poorer nations. While the US and Argentina opposed the declaration, most G20 members, including China, Russia, and the EU, backed it. The summit was marked by a diplomatic row after the US boycotted the event and South Africa refused to hand over the presidency to a junior US official. Despite this, Ramaphosa has reaffirmed that the G20's purpose is to address global challenges through multilateral cooperation. Brazilian President Lula da Silva has meanwhile also praised the summit's outcomes, highlighting the importance of a continued multilateral engagement. This is the latest that we are tracking on the broadcast as far as the G20 summit is concerned. We in fact heard that soundbite yesterday as well of Cyril Ramaphosa, where he had stated that with the gavel he'll be closing the ceremony. It will be handed over to the United States of America, although the formal handing over did not really take place. The ceremony for the first time ever has broken protocol. This is something unprecedented. that people did not really anticipate would happen, but Trump, of course, did not turn up. Neither did he depute anyone in his position. Many people were expecting Marco Rubio to at least be deputed. That did not happen either. The US administration, of course, has its own reasons and its own gripes with South Africa, whether it is South Africa's case against Israel at the International Criminal Court or even South Africa being a part of BRICS. We're expecting the handover to take place next week. In more news, European and African leaders, including France's Emmanuel Macron, Germany's Friedrich Merz, and Kenya's William Ruto, have gathered in Luanda for the 7th EU-African Union Summit. Talks will center on trade, migration, and critical raw materials, but EU leaders are also seeking to push back against a US draft to end the war in Ukraine, which many see as favoring Moscow. The summit comes as Africa emerges as a diplomatic and economic battleground, with China, Russia, and the US, as well as Gulf states, competing for influence. The EU hopes to showcase investments in infrastructure, energy, and industrial projects, including the Lobito Corridor in Angola under its Global Gateway initiative, while also seeking to secure critical minerals and boost intra-African trade. Experts stress that success depends on delivering real locals' benefits and not just visibility or promises. French President Emmanuel Macron has stated that he believes in a reinvented partnership during a press conference in Gabon alongside President Brice Oligui Nguema. Macron's visit focuses on strengthening and renewing relations between the two countries, coming 2 years after the coup that ended the Bongo family's 55-year rule. This trip marks a continued French effort to reset ties in Central Africa, where political transitions have challenged traditional alliances and sparked debates over France's role in the region. Listen in to what the leaders have had to say.
Je crois dans un partenariat réinventé et en effet dans une relation qui soit respectueuse, où nous devons être exemplaires les uns et les autres et où les situations doivent amener à des partenariats gagnant-gagnant. Je soutiens totalement ce que le président de la République vient de dire, c'est-à-dire que l'Afrique ne peut plus être un continent de simple extraction des ressources. On doit réussir à construire des nouveaux modèles, mais ce qui suppose des investissements énergétiques, des transformations de pratiques, mais où on valorise, où on transforme ces ressources de manière accrue. Et donc nous accompagnons ce partenariat gagnant-gagnant, respectueux des intérêts de chacun. Nous faisons sur un chemin critique qui doit être aussi cohérent et compétitif.
Mon gouvernement a hérité d'une dette abyssale, fruit d'une gestion irresponsable et opaque. Tout cela orchestré par Ali Bongo Ondimba, son épouse Sylvia et son fils Noureddin, aujourd'hui en fuite à Londres et refusant de se présenter devant les tribunaux de notre pays. Nous comptons sur la coopération judiciaire entre nos deux États pour que les décisions de justice soient exécutées et que les avoirs détournés soient restitués au peuple gabonais.
On that note, viewers, it's a wrap on the Africa Brief. We will continue to track all of these updates very, very closely, but in the meantime, we're dipping into a quick short break.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome, viewers. I am Pia and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. And let's take a look at the headlines this hour. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has hailed the tremendous progress made in talks with his.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
Welcome. You're watching Trending Tech on NewsX World, where we bring you the latest tech breakthroughs, trends and gadgets from around the world. Now, the escalating threat of political deepfakes is fundamentally challenging democratic integrity ahead of high-stakes global elections in 2025. Driven by cheap, easy AI tools, the disruption extends beyond simple misinformation to sophisticated financial scams. Instances include deepfake videos used by scammers in Romania and Czech elections to promote bogus investment schemes and similar fraud during the Canadian federal election as well. Political manipulation significantly risen due to AI-generated content, with notable incidents impacting high-stakes races and political figures worldwide. Instances include a deepfake video falsely showcasing UK Conservative MP George Freeman announcing his defection, and an AI-generated video used to mislead voters about Senator John Ossoff in the Georgia US Senate race. As the volume of unregulated synthetic content soars, global democracies face unprecedented challenges to authenticate and public faith as well. On that note, to talk more about this, joining us now is Tamir Pariente, co-founder and Chief Technology Officer of Truly. Based in Tel Aviv, Tamir is an expert in specializing in deepfake detection across communication channels. Bringing a background from the IDF intelligence corps, he now leads Truly's efforts to safeguard trust and authenticity, delivering real-time solutions for deepfake fraud. At the outset, I'd like to thank you for joining us on this broadcast. To start it off, what exactly are these AI political deepfakes that we're seeing, especially during election season?
Yes, hello, thank you. So these deepfakes are actually being generated using various technologies, such as image animation and image-to-video technologies that Google just announced, the Veo 3 and Veo 3.1. And Sora of OpenAI It's extremely easy to use, extremely cheap. Everyone can use it without any regulation. It's crazy.
Mhm. Indeed, and a quick follow-up to that, the threat is escalating, particularly now since technology has really entrenched every factor of life. It's really democratized as well. People in remote areas also have access to smartphones, cheap data as well, including 5G data. But in your assessment, what factors such as cheap, easy AI tools and the high number of global elections are driving the massive spike in political deepfakes?
Yes, so I think that now, more than ever, not only cheap, but also accessible. It used to be very very difficult to achieve access to big VLLMs, big language models that are capable to generate images and videos. And nowadays, it's extremely easy. Anyone can put credit card and start using it, upload one single photo and have it animated to an like Hollywood scene, right?
Yes.
And I think that because of they are shocking videos of very famous people doing shocking things, it is just very straightforward that it gets a lot of attentions from the population via social media, and the recommendation algorithm of Facebook, Instagram are just promoting these videos. And what we see is millions of people just taking the bait and believing such videos before anyone authenticated them.
Indeed, and we've also seen specific instances, especially from the Georgia US Senate race, even to elections in Romania. What do these cases tell us about the varying tactical goals of those who are deploying these deepfakes?
Yes, it's a good point. So in some cases, the goal is like to suppress the turnout, right? By making a candidate appear or say something offensive. And in some cases, we see that deepfake is used to do some fraud, to manipulate people to think that a person wants to get their money, like we saw with Elon Musk like a year ago in the YouTube channel, right? And sometimes it's just simply to create chaos, because chaos benefits whoever is spreading the disinformation. But the pattern is clear, like political deepfakes are not always about convincing people. It's like often about destroying trust, which is much harder, right?
Yes, absolutely. And can you also, for the benefit of our viewers, explain how this threat really fits into the broader debate over social media platform accountability and the need for global regulation of AI-generated political content?
Yes, of course. So social media actually struggling because of AI generated is now cheap, right? It's fast and it's unlimited in any scale. So we need clear global rules for labeling AI generated and especially political content. And we should remove it. It's it needs to be instant, right? And we also need transparency from the platforms, how they detect, how they moderate, and how they want to prevent the deepfakes. Because they have abused the deepfakes with the recommendation algorithms, as I spoke about before.
Absolutely. And detection technologies also must be faster than the attacks. This is something that those who are tracking political deepfakes have pointed out. This is one primary concern. In your assessment, what then are the biggest technical challenges facing detection specialists today in trying to block real-time deepfake attacks during an election?
Okay, so first of all, it's speed, because it's super, like deepfake can be generated in like seconds today. So even if I can detect in seconds a deepfake, still the media does not contain one in every 10 videos is fake. It's 1 to 1,000 to 10,000, but these 1 to 10,000 get so much attention. And so you can't just run deepfake detection, which is expensive, by the way, on all the media. That's why Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and everyone is struggling with it, basically.
Indeed, and alongside the big detection platforms, what impact could local tech startups and grassroots organizations have in combating deepfake disinformation and increasing voter education?
So startups can today contribute with the research, right? Because nowadays it's still expensive to detect deepfakes, and we are still researching on cheaper and faster ways to detect it. People are talking about watermarks that the actual manufacturers of cameras and input devices like microphones would put on the like a signature on the video itself, so you would know in the uploading to the social media if this video was generated or created with a real device. So that's one thing that the startup community is working hard on. And we need organizations such as like the big corporations like such as Facebook, Instagram, Google, all of the, as I said, the communication devices, manufacturing. We need them to come together, shake hands, and think about a solution for this.
Indeed, sir. You've also spoken about the algorithm. You've pointed towards the algorithm many times. That is sort of exacerbating the effects, the reach specifically of these political deepfakes. What do you think can really be done to combat this? As you've mentioned, it's important for all of these global platforms, whether it is a Meta or Google, for them to come together and sort of reach a solution. But that's not really taking place because the internet is an open space, even if things are made, even if there are certain tools that are put out, the intentions are good, but they're being used for the wrong reasons by individuals. How do you think then could such regulation really take place? Could the algorithm then at least be controlled to sort of limit the reach of these deepfakes?
Yes, so it's a great question actually, and I think there are many ways to tackle it, but one of the straightforward that comes to my mind is when you have such spike in the algorithm that this video is rocketing, you need to check. There is many solutions today to these big platforms to describe what is in this video, and you can check via GPT or any other large language model. You can check what is the probability of such thing happening. If you see the president of North Korea saying, "I'm gonna kill everyone," it's a fake content. So you should, or at least it should trigger, we need to check it out because before we recommend it to the entire world, right?
Indeed, and you also mentioned that there is some sort of pattern that we sort of witness as far as political deepfakes are concerned, not just the frequency, but the way in which these deepfake videos and the original videos are altered to make these deepfakes. Could you tell us a little more about the kind of pattern that certain individuals or organizations follow, and what really is the motive apart from sowing distrust?
You mean about the why attackers do that?
And the way in which they do that. What have your observations been as far as dealing with deepfake videos are concerned?
Yeah, so there are many ways to create deepfakes. There are models to swap faces. So I can appear to you now as Tamir, but I can swap my face to be someone else. And there are models to just take this image and make a scene out of it, like you see Google. Most advanced model right now. So different techniques to create such deepfakes, and every one of them has different purpose. So the face swapping are used to make fraud in real-time communication channels. Like you can call someone you love or call someone they think you love, but you're actually an imposter and you are asking them to do something for your benefit, which is false. Like transfer money, do me a favor in this, send me a password for this account. We see many politicians, especially politicians, because they have a lot of power in their accounts, fall for these kind of frauds.
Indeed, and we've discussed the sort of challenges that the specialists have faced, but when you talk to lawmakers as well, we do know that laws regarding AI are not really codified. We've seen the European Union trying to build about a framework, but then there are several other countries where technology has permeated every aspect of life. countries that are still sort of grappling as far as sort of codifying AI and ensuring that it is added to its information technology laws are concerned. In your conversation with lawmakers, what sort of challenges in your observation, do they really face when it comes to bringing about these policies and laws?
Yes, so it's very difficult to maintain in this rapid growth of deepfake technologies. It's very hard to maintain like regulations, because regulations stops the research. And I don't think that politicians really want to stop the research, because there are many benefits to developing such tools. It's not only used for manipulation and fraud, right? It's also used for the creating more entertainment, like in the media industry, in the film industry, and also in intelligence industries. So I don't think it's going to be anytime soon regulated, the research. And research often creates products that not everyone can regulate. Like we see that the markets in Europe and in the US are trying to regulate, but China is crazy. China have so many advanced models out there that are free to use by anyone without any regulation.
Yes.
So that's also a problem.
Indeed. And one final question I wanted to understand, since you referred to the US and China, we do know that there's some sort of technological battle that these two countries are engaging in. Both want to have an edge over each other as far as AI is concerned. But when we speak of deep fakes and AI at large, do you see some sort of discrepancy between those who have the hardware and those countries that do not? And is then political deepfakes just a people-to-people and individual-to-individual, organization-to-organization matter, or even sometimes a country-to-country matter?
Yes, so I do think that US is much more advanced in deepfake technologies, like creating and detecting. But it is not only about hardware, it's also about research. They are much advanced in research. We know that Meta and Samsung and also Microsoft have many papers and advanced research from 2021, when China didn't even start to work there. And so China, I don't think it will struggle to recreate these research. It's not a hardware issue, like they could afford this number of GPUs. They won't be able to share it in these scales. They don't have this capacity in GPUs to make it available for everyone, but they have it available for like their own government usage. So country to country, I think it is a problem. And also the darknet community, as I said, exploding in open source research that is very dangerous to the population, right?
Yes.
Because it is not regulated, and anyone can buy today in the darknet a deepfake of someone and impersonate to them, and that's a problem. But I don't think it's like a one-to-one or company-to-company problem. It's more about government to government.
All right, sir. With that, I'd like to thank you for taking out time speaking to us on Trending Tech today on this very important matter.
Thank you very much.
With that, viewers, it's a wrap on this episode of Trending Tech. For more such updates in the technological sphere and innovation, stay tuned on NewsX World.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Welcome back to NewsX World. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching Focal Length, where we get you a briefing on topics from across the world. Thousands of people, primarily members of Generation Z, are marching in major Mexican cities to protest against widespread crime, corruption and government impunity. The demonstrations, which were partly sparked by the recent assassination of an anti-crime mayor, resulted in clashes with police in Mexico City, injuring at least 120 people. Now, to talk about this, joining us is Alex Gonzalez Umarod. He is the editor-in-chief of the Mexico Political Economist. He's also edited and written for publications including White Paper, Rest of World, America's Quarterly, Hyperallergenic, Nexos, and more. He also consults widely on political and economic matters across Latin America. Today, he will be discussing the latest developments in Mexican politics, the economic implications of recent policy decisions, the regional political trends in Latin America, and their impact on global business. Thank you very much for joining us, Alex Gonzalez Umarod. Let's get straight into it. My first question to you is, what is driving the recent wave of Gen Z-led protests across Mexico, and how are authorities responding to this new generation of politically engaged youth?
So those are two different questions. The first answer is there are two main motivations behind the protests. The number one is the perfectly legitimate anger at what is going on in Mexico, the violence and the lack of security that has been going on for decades now. The other half is, of course, the fact that there is clearly a force behind the scenes that is pushing for this sort of protest. And this will answer your second question, which is that ultimately, I'm not quite sure that this is a Gen Z protest. There are a few young people, but you look at the demographics of the people actually marching, and they are by far boomers, older people, people who aren't actually Gen Z. You see the way the communication is done, how it's done. I think ultimately what you can conclude is this wasn't a protest by politically engaged youth. This is actually more clearly a protest by organizers who haven't quite revealed themselves. I don't know if there's anything too sinister. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that the opposition in Mexico is very discredited. And so it often mobilizes in a covert way so as not to show its true colors.
Yes, and Alex, following on from that, another leading story coming out of Mexico, of course, would be the recent harassment incident involving President Sheinbaum. And what does that incident reveal about broader security lapses and the polarized political climate in Mexico right now?
It's a disgrace for many reasons. Of course, the sexual harassment of the president is not only disgusting because of the fact that it is the sexual harassment of a woman, any woman. It is the president of Mexico who should have had a far more stringent security contingent, literally hours after the brutal murder of a very popular mayor in a different state. You have this man coming up from behind her and groping her. Completely unacceptable, both in moral terms, but also in terms of her security unit.
Yes, and of course we've mentioned about the killing of this mayor in Mexico. How does this incident speak of the law and order situation in the country?
Mexico is a very big country with a very complex system of security apparatuses, cartel relationships. And so when we talk about Mexico, we're actually talking about a series of different places. A really tragic stat that I like to tell people is that 50% of all the brutal violence going on in Mexico is concentrated in just a tiny handful of Mexico's 2,000 municipalities, which on one side means there are places like the Yucatan Peninsula, which are safer than Canada. You've got Mexico City, which is safer than New York or Washington, D.C. But then you've got places like Michoacán, Uruapan, where the mayor was killed, where there is violence unlike anywhere else in the world that we've seen. And so that's the enormous complexity about Mexico. Loads of violence concentrated in very, very specific places.
It's very interesting, and the United Nations has, of course, rated Mexico as one of the most violent countries for women in the world. We have seen many Mexican women now demanding access to women-only taxis and rideshare services. And what does this say about the current state of their safety? What is the government doing to combat this also?
Mexico, again, is a very polarized place when it comes to this. Obviously, feminicides are rampant, and they have been classified as such by the government. But there are also lots of interesting solutions going on across the country. Mexico is one of the few places in the world that has pretty much complete gender parity in politics. So more than 50% of the Congress is women, more than 50% of the judiciary is women, our president is a woman, and yet, to a great extent, that underscores the terrible plight of women, that even in these conditions where women are represented fairly in politics, even then they're under enormous threat in Mexico.
Let's now move on to the country's relationship with the broader continent. How does Mexico's internal challenges within the broader political and social shifts happening across Latin America, from economic instability to rising authoritarianism tendencies?
Mexico's an interesting place because it's bucked a lot of trends recently. As the rest of the world moves to the right, Mexico's left-wing government has consolidated. That worries a lot of people because they see the consolidation of a massive party, sort of reminiscent to India's Congress Party. That worries a lot of people because they say it'll become overbearing, authoritarian, and repress the rest of the opposition. The issue to me is they've won it so far relatively fair and square. It's after years of right-wing misgovernment of Mexico that the left-wing government was introduced into Mexico by democratic mandate on a massive scale. President Sheinbaum, even though her ratings have gone down since this violence, is still an enormously popular president who can mobilize enormous forces to her. The issue is, I think, on the opposition side, a lot of the claims about dictatorship and authoritarianism actually come from the ineptitude of the opposition, which is not able to capitalize on a lot of the legitimate anger in Mexico properly. You can see it through how they've tried to jump onto these protests. So they say they're completely nonpartisan, and yet I only see partisan and party political representatives talking about it on the television. And so to me, that represents the fundamental issue of Mexico's opposition. It has a lot of people it can and should work with, and yet it is completely unable to, through corruption, through the fact that they've been destroyed at the polling booths, and they're still sort of recuperating.
Now, given current tensions over migration, trade and fentanyl trafficking, how would you characterize the state of US-Mexico relations today and where they are likely headed in 2025 under Sheinbaum's leadership?
The state of US-Mexico relations at the moment is surprisingly good. When it comes to security, it's sort of shocking because you see US Secretary of State Marco Rubio coming to Mexico, and he is famously a very hard man when it comes to representing America's interests. And he came to Mexico to say that bar none, Mexico is the best partner they have when it comes to security. So Mexico and the US are working very, very closely because they have a common enemy, which is organized crime. So on that front, I think we have a lot of positive work going on, a lot of intelligence sharing, and beyond the posturing, a lot of collaboration. The issue comes when it comes to trade. Trade is a big issue for the United States because it is woken up to the fact that China is nipping at its heels, not only in cheap imports, but also in high technology. So they're having to reconfigure. I think at first they thought from the United States that they could basically isolate and do an America first and an only America vision of manufacturing and commerce and services. They've realized that they don't have enough people or the capacity to do that, especially not in the short term. And so that's where Mexico comes in. Mexico is essential to the United States, not only because we send them most of their products when it comes to manufacturers, when it comes to agricultural services, etc., but also in terms of security. The United States can't keep up with China's pace unless it's working alongside Mexico, which doesn't just provide cheap labor, which is the sort of classic excuse that people use, but rather specialized labor that Americans are simply not doing anymore. And so a lot of the US auto manufacturing sector depends on Mexico's, for example. It's not that you could get rid of Mexico, cut off Mexico, and then suddenly have a thriving US auto manufacturers sector. You'd actually get the opposite. You'd hurt them. And so I think that's what President Trump has started to realize slowly but surely, as he realizes how deeply integrated Mexico and the United States are. It's an issue he wants to deal with. He thinks some things are unfair, but I think he's come to realize that Mexico is a net asset for the US, not a problem.
Alex Gonzalez or Merod, thank you very much for joining us here on Focal Length. A fascinating conversation about a fascinating country. But with that, it's a wrap on this episode of Focal Length. For more international news updates, stay tuned on NewsX World.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council.
Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. The US and Ukraine have said that they have drafted a refined peace framework in Geneva to revise an earlier plan criticized as too favorable towards Russia. With both sides committing to intensive work